Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. I am Kris. This is Andrew Jackson, the 8-Year Reign of Terror documentary. This is going to come out tomorrow. I'm rushing it, which will be Wednesday, the 9th. I know what you're thinking. Why? This is going to be 3 videos, 3 about 25-minute videos. You're like, why, Kris? Why are you going to do that? That's because Saturday, the 12th, 10 a.m., I have a tour with my nephew. VIP tour at the Hermitage. It'll be my second time going. VIP tour, the ticket was $70, but the tour is 2 hours. And last time I went, you could take pictures. I don't know if you can take video, but I'm going to attempt it. I'll be making some videos and some shorts, and I will post them. So if you're interested, they'll be there. If not, you won't watch them, so it won't matter. But that's the goal. Because this is going to be such a long video, I'm going to go ahead and get into it. Before I do, I clicked this before. My bad. Clicked it before I started it. I got excited. People profiles, love the channel. Click on that right there. Click on the subscribe. And if you want to donate to the channel and have your name sponsoring a video, click on the thanks, donate to the channel, tell me the video. I try to get it out as fast as I possibly can. All right, I'm going to shut up because it's going to be a long video. Let's get into it.
The man known to history as Andrew Jackson was born on the 15th of March, 1767. His birthplace is unclear, but it is likely that he was born at the house of his aunt and uncle, Jane and James Crawford, in modern-day Lancaster County, South Carolina.
I was confused for a second. I was going to say, no, he was born in either North Carolina or South Carolina. They're not quite sure, but they think South Carolina because of the Waxhaw region. But I'm going to shut up. I didn't know the house, though. That's interesting.
His father, also named Andrew Jackson, was an Irish Presbyterian whose Scottish ancestors arrived in Ulster, Ireland in the 1690s.
His dad, I'm going to be talking a lot. His dad, I'm sorry, Andrew Jackson's uncle, was it Hugh? Anyways, he had served in the British military, and if you know anything about the French and Indian War, as it's called on the American side, then you will know about George Washington and the General Braddock expedition, which General Braddock was killed. He was the British commander. Washington led all the British soldiers out. They were attacked by the French and the Indian. He got a retreat in order and saved the lives. And Jackson's brother later said that Washington was the reason why he was still alive. They had moved. He returned after the war, went back to Ireland, or England, and then Ireland, and the brother and the father, Jackson's father, Andrew Jackson, were going to move to America because they wanted to claim a lot of the land, potentially, that was going to be given out to the British soldiers that the colonists were not eligible for, which Washington really wanted. They were going to try to get a lot of that prime farmland. And the day before they were going to go, the uncle came to the brother. And they were like getting ready to load onto the boat. And the uncle came to him and said he'd met a woman. I think she was British. Come on, you got to move. He had met a woman, and she didn't want to come, and he didn't want to risk losing her because he felt like this was the one. So he decided not to travel to America, and it was just, come on, stop. It was just Andrew Jackson's father. Andrew Jackson and his family. The uncle never showed up.
Many of these Scottish migrants to Ireland left their adopted homeland in Ireland after just a few decades, and in the 18th century settled in America as the Scots-Irish. Andrew Jackson was amongst them. In 1765, he left Carrickfergus near Belfast with his wife and 2 young boys, Hugh and Robert, for North America.
That's where I got Hugh from. My fault.
And eventually settled in the Waxhaw region in the valley of the Catawba River in the Carolinas. In February 1767, while working on his 200-acre farm at 12 Mile Creek, Andrew Jackson Sr. died after a logging accident a few weeks before the birth of his third son. Andrew Jackson's mother, Elizabeth Jackson, was born around 1740 in Carrickfergus. She married Andrew Jackson Sr. around 1761. After the death of her husband, Elizabeth and her sons moved into the house of her sister and brother-in-law, Jane and James Crawford, in the Carolinas, where she gave birth to her third son, naming him Andrew after her recently deceased husband. Jackson grew up during a period of intensifying political tensions between the British government and the subjects of its colonies in North America, which would eventually lead to the outbreak of the American Revolution. At the end of the French and Indian Wars of 1754 to 1763, the British had gained control of Canada from France, but rather than rewarding the denizens of the 13 colonies along the east coast of what is now the United States for their loyalty in fighting for the crown during these wars, King George III's government in England instead imposed heavy taxes on the colonies through the Sugar Act of 1764 and the notorious Stamp Act of 1765. These measures provoked riots and boycotts from the colonists who believed that they should not be subject to taxation without parliamentary representation. These grievances re-emerged when the Tea Act of 1773 was introduced, a move which led to the infamous Boston Tea Party in the colony of Massachusetts in December 1773. British retaliation.
Allegedly, we don't know if that's actually true, if it ever actually happened.
Retaliatory measures against Boston and Massachusetts led the colonies to convene the First Continental Congress to coordinate a joint boycott of British goods in 1774. Armed hostilities commenced in April 1775 when British regulars exchanged fire with American militiamen at Lexington and Concord near Boston. And in June, the Second Continental Congress met in Philadelphia to establish the Continental Army and appointed George Washington of Virginia as its commander in the first stages of the American Revolutionary War. Subsequent events are well known. The colonies formed themselves into a United States of America and declared their independence from the British Crown in the summer of 1776. A long conflict would follow over the next 5 years, but in 1781 the colonials emerged victorious in the war, and 2 years later the British accepted peace terms which acknowledged the independence of the new United States. Andrew grew up against the backdrop of this conflict. During his childhood, he emerged as the brightest prospect out of the family's 3 children, and his mother, Elizabeth, made arrangements to train him as a church minister by sending him to a religious school. However, Elizabeth soon realized that Andrew's restless character made him unsuitable for a career in the church, and his schooling appears to have been cut short. Back home, she encouraged her sons to participate in militia drills, being an avid supporter of the colonial cause against the British. Her eldest son, Hugo, joined the militia but died during a military campaign in the summer of 1779. By 1781, the 14-year-old Andrew and his 17-year-old brother Robert were also marching with the local militia. In April 1781, the 2 brothers were captured at the Crawford House, and after Andrew refused to clean the shoes of a British officer, the officer struck him with his sword, wounding the young boy in the head and hand. The Jackson brothers and their cousin Thomas Crawford were taken to Camden, South Carolina, and after a couple of months' captivity, Elizabeth Jackson arrived to secure their release as part of a prisoner exchange. The boys had contracted smallpox in the prison camp, and while Andrew survived, Robert died soon after. Then, just weeks later, Andrew's mother contracted cholera and died too.
So, I've heard, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, that according to one of the things that I read, his mother, so the brothers were being brought back. The one died. She saved Andrew. And after he had, was thinking rehabilitated, but that's not the word. But after he recovered, that's the word. She had been told that there was fellow patriots from a next town or two that had been wounded. And so she was going to go there to help treat them. And I think there was some cousins. So that's why she wanted to go there. She went. She had died from a disease, which is one thing. The other thing that I heard was that while she was treating them, the British found out that patriots were there and were, being treated. And they went there, kicked in the door. Everyone that was there, the soldiers in recovery, were shot, bayoneted. And she was one of the people that maybe she refused to get off the cousin or, was protecting him. And they bayoneted her. And it was said that she had received upwards of 40 bayonet stabbings. Don't know if that's one person just continuously going or if it was multiple soldiers just, but her clothing was removed, and as some of the other soldiers' clothing was removed too. Her clothing was removed. She was identified. Her clothing was removed, and she was buried in a mass grave. Tired. She was buried in a mass grave. The clothing was then delivered to Jackson, and that's pretty much how he found out his mom died. Is that true? I don't know. That was one of the stories that I've heard. But I've heard this story more. I want to say the other one could be true just because Jackson really hated the British, but I think more than likely that was probably just a cover as to maybe that's why he also hated him. He hated him because they wounded him, plus Revolutionary War and all that. But yeah, that is another story that I've heard. So I don't know.
Thus, at only 14 years of age...
Sorry, my Alexa just kicks on sometimes.
Andrew Jackson was orphaned as the only surviving member of his immediate family. In December 1782, the British evacuated Charleston, the largest port and city in the southern colonies, as part of their disengagement from the 13 colonies. This enabled Jackson to enter the city and claim a modest inheritance from his late paternal grandfather, which he promptly lost at the gambling table. He then returned home to the Waxhaw region, where he worked for a time as a teacher and managed the 200-acre farm he had inherited from his family. After a time, Jackson decided to become a lawyer. In early 1785, shortly before his 18th birthday, he was apprenticed to
Side note, I'm sorry, I'll go back. That is beautiful. Wouldn't you love to have a house and just look over all that? That's beautiful. Looks like there's a house right there.
Shortly before his 18th birthday, he was apprenticed to Spruce McKay, a lawyer in Salisbury, North Carolina.
Also, can you imagine him as a teacher trying to do something and 8-year-old, 7-year-old kids is like, nah, and he's just like, oh, you want to duel? I'll duel you right now. Kid's like, I don't even know what that means. I could see it.
After 2 years of studying the law by helping McKay run his legal practice, Jackson went on to study under the wing of John Stokes, one of North Carolina's leading lawyers and a veteran of the Revolutionary War. After 6 months, Jackson was licensed as an attorney in North Carolina in September 1787. Hence, at just 20 years of age, he entered the legal trade, but he struggled to find clients, perhaps on account of his youth. In the summer of 1788, Jackson accompanied John McNary to the Western District of North Carolina. Back in April 1784, North Carolina had ceded its territory between the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi to Congress to help pay off its war debts, and its inhabitants sought recognition as the independent state of Franklin. Part of the territory was also claimed by Spain, which controlled the province of Louisiana to the west of the Mississippi. By 1788, North Carolina rescinded its cession of its western counties and was trying to reassert its control over the region. McNary was a fellow apprentice under Mackay and had been appointed the new court's judge, while Jackson was named prosecutor. In October 1788, Jackson and McNary arrived in Nashville. Jackson lodged with Rachel Donaldson, the widow of John Donaldson, who led the expedition to settle the area 9 years earlier. Mrs. Donaldson's daughter, also called Rachel, was living there with her husband Louis Robards. Louis soon became jealous of Jackson and suspicious of his intentions. After refusing Jackson's challenge to a duel, Robards left his wife while Jackson moved out of the Donaldson house. It's unclear whether Jackson was romantically involved with Rachel at the time of the incident, but the two did subsequently marry in the Spanish-administered town of Natchez on the eastern bank of the Mississippi in the winter of 1789. Louis Robards did not initiate divorce proceedings until 1791, which was only granted in late 1793, so theoretically this first marriage between Andrew and Rachel was invalid. They exchanged vows again in January 1794, following the finalization of Rachel's divorce. By the time of the Jacksons' elopement in Natchez, the United States had adopted a new constitution. The product of an initiative to strengthen the federal government, the Constitution was created through a series of compromises between the delegates of a convention of the 13 states that met in Philadelphia in 1787. While smaller states wanted equal representation and large states wanted representation based on population, the framers decided on equal representation in the Senate and population-weighted representation in the House of Representatives. The Constitution split the country into Federalists, who supported the document, and Anti-Federalists, who believed it took too much power from individual states and gave that power to the central government. After the Constitution was ratified in the summer of 1788, the Federalists agreed to pass a Bill of Rights to appease their opponents. After North Carolina ratified the Constitution in November 1789, it agreed to cede its western counties to the federal government a second time, which formed part of the Southwest Territory created by Congress in 1790. This temporarily left Jackson without a job, but he reminded the new governor, William Blount, that the district still required an attorney and was confirmed in the role. In addition to his public office, he had private clients who were short on cash but could pay in land. This caused him to be involved in land speculation, forming a partnership with his friend and fellow lawyer John Overton. He also ran a trading enterprise, but quit the business after a counterparty defaulted and left him heavily indebted. In 1796, he and Rachel bought an estate called Hunter's Hill. where they lived for 8 years until selling out and moving next door to a property they called the Hermitage. Jackson owned many slaves here. While Jackson made very few oral and written statements about his views on slavery, it is generally agreed that his conduct and treatment of the slaves he owned was poor. There is, for instance, evidence of his ordering slaves to be whipped, and he separated slave families by selling off one slave and keeping the others. His conveyed views when he advocated good treatment of his slaves was always expressed as someone who was guarding his investment in what he considered to be his property, rather than someone who cared for the individuals involved on a human level. Over a dozen of Jackson's slaves would live at the White House when he became president, and they possibly were involved in building work there, which expanded the building and grounds. Jackson entered politics for the first time in 1796 after the district's population was found to have exceeded 60,000 people and was thus eligible for statehood. In January, he attended the Constitutional Convention at Knoxville, where he played an influential role in the establishment of the new state of Tennessee out of what had been the Western Territories of North Carolina. After Tennessee joined the Union on the 1st of June 1796, Jackson was elected in October as the state's lone congressman to the House of Representatives. He was a member of Thomas Jefferson's Democratic-Republican Party, which sought to limit the powers of the federal government and supported states' rights. In Congress, Jackson criticized President George Washington's administration for siding with the rival Federalist Party, which sought to expand the power of the central government. He also spoke in favor of a measure to compensate John Sevier, the governor of Tennessee, who led a reprisal attack on Cherokee settlements as commander of the Tennessee militia in 1793. In July 1797, Jackson's political mentor, William Blount, was expelled from the Senate after being deemed guilty of plotting to attack the Spanish in Louisiana and Florida in an attempt to open up navigation rights of the Mississippi to Americans. Blount returned to Tennessee, where he influenced Jackson's election as his replacement in the United States Senate, though Jackson resigned in April 1798 after just 6 months in the post, seemingly because he considered himself unsuited to the deliberative nature of legislative politics.
Yeah, he hated how slow it went. It was everything was, we're going to vote on this. No, or we're going to roll call. Okay, we're going to do this. And he just found that the politics of everything was so political, and he didn't understand why things needed to be done this way. He felt that it was just a waste of time. Right or wrong, I don't know. I've never been a politician, but it seems like sometimes it just seems like it's just a waste of time. Like, I don't know.
Upon his return to Tennessee, Jackson accepted an offer from Governor Sevier to serve as a judge on the Tennessee Superior Court. While his personality may have been equally unsuited to be a judge, he dispensed justice in a way that was familiar to the Westerners. On one occasion, after a sheriff failed to arrest a local outlaw who threatened the court with a pistol and knife, Jackson took off his judicial robes and confronted the man himself with a pistol, forcing him to surrender. In February
So, the guy was supposed to be at court. A little more detail in the story. I was hoping that's why I got excited. I was hoping they'd say more. The guy was supposed to be in court. He did not show. He let it be known he was like across the street at a saloon or whatever. So the police the cops, police, whatever they were called at the time. They were, Jackson's like, well, where are they? Where is he? And they're like, well, he's not here. He's at the saloon across the street, or, the bar, tavern, whatever you want to call it. And Jackson goes, well, go get him. We'll move on to another case. They go over. They come back. And they're just disheveled. One guy's like holding his face. The cop's holding his face. It's just one cop. And he comes up. He's like, oh, he punched me. Threw me on the floor. And Jackson's like, okay, well, there's a few of you. Go get him. So he goes over again. 10 minutes later, they come back. A couple more cops are beat up. And they're like, oh, he's threatening us. He's threatening to shoot us or whatever. And Jackson's like, he doesn't dictate the rules. Go get him. And I think it was a third time, or maybe on the third time, the cops were like, we don't want to do this. Like, he's just going to beat us up. And everyone in the bar is laughing at us, because we're police. We're being humiliated. And so Jackson's like, okay, we're going to take a recess. He looks at the two and he goes, deputize me. And they're like, what? He stands up, takes off his robe, starts putting on his gun belt, and he goes, deputize me. They realize, oh, yeah, okay, I don't know how it goes, whatever, there you go. You're deputized, right? So he goes walking across the street, walks into the saloon, looks around, and calls the guy's name. And everyone by then is like, uh-oh, there's another dummy who's about to try to come in. So they're all laughing. The guy turns around. He's like, yeah, that's me. Jackson pulls both pistols, pops the, I almost said collar. Wow. Cocks the hammer, points it at him, and says something to the effect of, please resist, something to that effect. And the guy just looks at him, and the guy's holding a gun and a knife. And he just puts him down, surrenders. He goes across the street, gets sentenced, whatever it was, disorderly conduct. I don't remember. He wasn't even charged with beating up the cops. Disorderly conduct, whatever. Pays like a $75 fine, whatever. He goes back out, back to the saloon. Everyone in there's like, well, the people, as he's walking over, they're like, why'd you surrender? Like, you beat up a couple cops. Why'd you surrender to him? And he goes, I saw death in his eyes. Jackson didn't play. And Jackson went back, by the way, walked him into court, walked back up around, took off his belt, sat down, put on his robe, and then, all right, now I'm the judge, and you're the criminal, you're guilty, boom, $75 fine. See ya. Like, but the guy, I'll never forget that. The guy said, I read that. He goes, I saw death in his eyes. And it's like, knowing what we know now, yeah, there was a permanent look of death in his eyes. Death followed him. Grim Reaper was like, this guy keeps me in business.
1802, the command of the Tennessee State Militia fell vacant. This was the position that Jackson desired above all else, but in order to obtain it, he would face the incredibly popular John Sevier. Around 5 years earlier, the two men had narrowly avoided a duel after Jackson discovered that Sevier had undermined his attempts to secure command of the militia in 1796. As the militia officers cast their votes in 1802, Jackson and Sevier were tied, and the decision went to Governor Archibald Rowan, who happened to be Jackson's friend. Rowan duly voted in Jackson's favor, and on the 1st of April 1802, Major General Andrew Jackson was named commander of the Tennessee State Militia. The circumstances of Jackson's election reignited his feud with Sevier, who returned to the governor's office the following year. One day, the two men exchanged public insults in the state capital of Knoxville. This led to a duel, but when the two men met to fight, no shots were exchanged, and both rode off, cursing the other as a coward.
I swear both of them fired in the air, but Hey, hey, I'm recording. I thought both of them fired in the air, but I could be wrong. I know he did fire in the air. Maybe it was a different duel.
In 1800, Thomas Jefferson was elected President of the United States, bringing to power a man who sympathized with the interests of rural frontier dwellers like Jackson.
I dislike
In
him.
1803,
I dislike Jefferson so much, but that's for a different video.
Jefferson's administration managed to purchase the vast Louisiana territory from Napoleon Bonaparte's government in France for $15 million, a relatively small sum, considering that the lands involved stretched from Louisiana north to the Dakotas and covered all or part of 15 of America's modern-day states.
On a side note, I found out not too long ago, a couple months maybe, I think I said it in a video. Napoleon's plan after Waterloo was to flee and come to America, and I guess he was going to stay somewhere around New Orleans. The governor of Louisiana, or maybe the mayor of New Orleans, had built or was going to build a mansion for him to come and live at. Now that mansion still exists, and I guess it's a restaurant now. But his goal was to flee to America, but he was captured by the British. Imagine how different it would be, because you never know with Napoleon. He shows up, he'd have been there 15 minutes and be like, all right, let's get an army together and take over the country. So can't really tell about him. But yeah, how different it could have been.
Napoleon had decided to sell this vast territory as he abandoned efforts to preserve France's overseas empire and instead concentrated on dominating continental Europe. Among other things, the Louisiana Purchase meant that American ships could now freely navigate and trade along the Mississippi River, an issue that was particularly important to the Westerners. In 1805, after the end of his term as Jefferson's vice president, Aaron Burr journeyed to the western frontier and met Jackson at Nashville, Tennessee, where the two men discussed the prospect of war with Spain, the new western neighbor of the United States, following the Louisiana Purchase. In the early 19th century, the Spanish controlled Mexico, Texas, and other regions westwards to California, as well as Florida. In the summer of 1806, Burr informed Jackson that he was hoping to instigate a war with Spain and expand the U.S. border. As commander of the Tennessee militia, Jackson was initially happy to supply him with troops, but he soon received news that Burr's intentions were not to fight Spain, but to try and carve out his own empire out of the Louisiana territory. As soon as he recognized Burr's treason, Jackson quickly disassociated himself from the former vice president. When the Burr conspiracy was uncovered, Jefferson responded by ordering his former vice president's arrest, and in June 1807, he was brought to trial at the district court in Richmond, Virginia. Jackson testified and gave evidence which implicated Burr. The former vice president, though, was soon exonerated on the basis that while he may have been conspiring to carve out his own country in the Louisiana territory, he had never actually carried out his designs. The previous year...
Side note about Aaron Burr. I don't know how many children he had, but I know he had a daughter. His daughter was coming to visit him, and oh boy, I'm not going to remember this correctly. Anyways, his daughter was coming to visit him. Either the ship she was on never made it to wherever he was. Maybe she was coming from the south and he was in New York. I don't remember. The ship never arrived. It was sunk in a storm or hit a mine. I don't remember. Oh, I don't think they know. Either that or the second one, she left on the ship, but she did not arrive on the ship. So maybe she fell overboard. To this day, they do not know what happened to her. And she was married and she had children, but they weren't, I don't think they were with her. And so Aaron Burr, the rest of his life, never knew what happened to one of his daughters. It's like a cold case to this day. Just a side note.
Jackson was involved in a duel with fatal consequences. A dispute over the authenticity of promissory notes paid to Jackson after a bet on a horse race led to a quarrel with Charles Dickinson, who may have additionally insulted Rachel Jackson in the process, a matter Jackson was not going to let rest. The two men faced each other across the border in Kentucky on the 30th of May, 1806. Dickinson fired first into Jackson's chest, breaking his ribs and narrowly missing his heart. After taking the time to steady himself and aim, Jackson pulled the trigger, only for his pistol to jam at half-cock. He pulled the pin back and fired again, dealing his opponent a mortal wound in the chest. The fact that Jackson killed Dickinson after a second pull of the trigger was a source of controversy and damaged his reputation for several years.
I would say the fact that he pulled the trigger and nothing happened, you would get, to be fair, you would get a second shot. Like a misfire doesn't count as a fire if it didn't fire. That's just my opinion. Maybe I'm a Jackson fanboy, so people are going to be like, oh, you're... I think that's fair. And I would say the other way. If Jackson fired at him and he pulled the trigger and nothing happened, oh, well, that's it. It's done. Like, no, you get a shot. I think that's only fair.
In the meantime, Jackson's economic fortunes suffered a setback in 1808 as the country was plunged into an economic crisis. In 1806, Napoleon, who had crowned himself Emperor of the French, had been unable to defeat Britain on the seas and resorted to economic warfare by banning all British trade with the European continent. As the British Navy responded by blockading French ports, neutral American merchant ships sailing to France risked getting caught in the middle. For many years, the Royal Navy had resorted to boarding American ships to search for deserters, in some cases kidnapping American sailors outright, a practice known as impressment. President Jefferson threatened to go to war with Britain over the issue, but knew that the United States lacked the military capacity for such a confrontation. After Ambassador to Britain James Monroe failed to persuade the British to make a treaty commitment to stop impressment, Jefferson passed the Embargo Act in late 1807, banning American ships from foreign trade.
Side note about James Monroe, the second president, John Adams, third president, Thomas Jefferson, died 4th of July, 1826. James Monroe, I think it was 1831. He died on the 4th of July. So number 2, number 3, and number 5 all died on the 4th of July within 5 years of each other, I believe. Could have been 1832, but I think it was 1831 because James Madison, I think he died at 1836. But then I think Calvin Coolidge is the only president, born on the 4th of July. Give me a second. I want to check now. Yeah, sorry. It chimed. I had no idea what was happening. James Monroe, yeah, he died July 4th, 1831. Hold on. All right. And the only U.S. president born on the 4th of July, Independence Day, was Calvin Coolidge, who was born in Plymouth Notch, Virginia. I can read, I promise. Was born in Plymouth Notch. I think it's Notch. Plymouth Notch, Vermont, July 4th, 1872. Silent Cal, as they say. Got a story about him. Already told it. Not for this video. Okay, back to this video, though. This has been a long one. I do apologize.
The embargo impacted the whole country, with merchants in the northeast unable to trade and southern farmers unable to export their produce. The decline in economic activity created major problems in Tennessee and other parts of the United States. In response, Jackson agitated for war with Britain. As the 1808 presidential election approached, Jackson refused to support Jefferson's hand-picked successor, James Madison, and
yes, James Madison was 1836. It says it. He was close. He was June 28th.
support Jefferson's hand-picked successor, James Madison, and instead backed the candidacy of James Monroe. Madison nevertheless won the Democratic-Republican nomination easily and was elected president in the autumn. Although Jefferson repealed the Embargo Act at the end of his second term, Madison continued to ban trade with Britain and France, doing little to alleviate the economic consequences for the country. In 1810, the young Henry Clay, who had served as defense attorney in the Burr trial, was elected to Congress representing Kentucky. The talented Clay was elected Speaker of the House immediately upon entering Congress in March 1811 and became one of the leading advocates for war with Britain. Clay found a willing ally in freshman Congressman John Calhoun of South Carolina, and the two were amongst the loudest of the war hawks, congressmen advocating for war with Britain.
Those are two guys. Oh, 25 minutes exactly. Hey, good time. I'm going to stop there. Those are two guys, John C. Calhoun. It's later in the video, so I shouldn't say it, but I'm going to say it now because he's on the thing. These two guys, Jackson hated. Calhoun, not as much, because that was, spoiler, becomes his vice president. But he said his biggest regret was not killing John C. Calhoun. So, and then Henry Clay was because of the corrupt bargain or the crooked deal, whatever it was, whichever one. One of them, corrupt bargain or the crooked deal. One of them goes to this and the other one goes to the election of, what's your name? Rutherford B. Hayes. Had to look at the bookshelf. Rutherford B. Hayes. So it's one or the other. Anyways, we're going to end this here. I apologize for the length, but if you had nothing to do, hey, great video to watch. I will be doing part 2 immediately after this. I got to let the dogs out and get some popcorn. So, and get a refill. So until then, have a good day. Have a good night.